these new bureaucracies and legislative entities are what we ought fear now, in the way that we are being coached by the legacy media. They will point out fear, stoke our fear, escalate our anxiety. That what we ought to be concerned about is the emergence of nationalist demagogues, populists that appear to be 21st century reincarnations of e.g. Mussolini, Stalin, Hitler. But actually, no, it's to the literature of that time we can look now, or the near contemporaneous literature, the writing of Huxley, Orwell, and even Kafka, who seem to intuit that what would happen is administrative powers that are invisible and difficult to discern would insidiously seep like fog under your door into your life. And two examples of that I'm fond of using are, if you ever interface with YouTube, and I'd love to ask you about CIA involvement with Google, Alphabet. Look, when you interface with them, there's a kind of HAL from 2001 style anodyne banality to their communication. The team have decided that you are demonetized and we cannot help you at this time. Or another example of this kind of bureaucratic power is a WHO treaty that says that we are here to help you, and all we need to do is bypass your national sovereignty. All we need is access to your budget, the ability to inoculate, the ability to censor, curiously enough. Gil Scott-Heron may have said the revolution will not be televised, but the force that we need to revolt against will not even come with identifiable semiotics or identifiable characters, not so much as a poster of Big Brother to warn us that we are facing horror. Could you talk us through the inception of big tech and social media? Because it's impossible to think that anything could be that powerful without the involvement of the powers you describe. How the somewhat innocent Weisner's Wurlitzer has become the Zuckerberg zoetrope, or whatever it is we're confronted with now, as big tech commingles with this kind of power, and how you've told us the history. How has it evolved into the technological age and become more powerful, starting perhaps with the relationships between big tech, social media, and the deep state?
Perfect. Yeah. So let's get to the origins of Google. So, there's a funny story about the internet, because when you're referring to big tech, we're talking about the big tech internet companies, primarily here, so like Google. And, they're all based on the internet, and the internet was created by the American military in order to manage the American empire. It was created by DARPA in the 1960s in order to digitize and be able to quickly share within the military all of the social science research that was being funded by the Eisenhower administration and the Kennedy administration, to be able to do anthropological and social science research, the reams of academic work that the military was paying academics to produce on foreign populations who were posing insurgency concerns to U.S.-installed dictators in different regions, or to U.S.-managed governments, after we had begun to territorially acquire all these different countries during the Cold War. And there were student revolts on college campuses in the 1960s against the internet before the internet even went private, because the internet, the World Wide Web, the private internet that all of us use, was not debuted until 1991, December 1990. But even in the 1960s, people realized that the computer was an instrument of U.S. statecraft. In fact, during these sort of anti-Vietnam protests at MIT, there you can even look for this if you run a search for this on your favorite search engine. They were revolting against what they called the octoputer, the idea that the computer and this DARPA-funded internet was going to be used as a world-spanning octopus power for the military to control other countries that student groups were accusing of being subject to U.S. imperialism. Now, what happened was, in 1991, the World Wide Web rolls out, and DARPA turns over the internet to the National Science Foundation and projects that through a bunch of universities to make it publicly available for commercial use. But the other side of this is that it was being used for soft power projection. See, when I was describing Wisner's Wurlitzer, the CIA created a bunch of proprietary media organizations like Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Radio Free Asia. These were all radio and then television programming that would project U.S. media and also pay media organizations within foreign countries to produce pro-U.S. propaganda. And that was a very easy thing to do when there were only a couple of different radio frequencies available in that country, or that country wasn't producing its own native content, its own native TV content. As other countries caught up to us in the other modalities of media soft power competition, the promise of the new internet for the State Department, the military, and the CIA was that this would be sort of like a new radio, a new TV, a new Voice of America, a new channel where America had first mover advantage because it was all the American internet. And so right away, as soon as the internet came out, DARPA commissioned a program called the Massive Digital Data Systems Program. And the Massive Digital Data Systems Program was a joint project of the NSA and the CIA in order to track how, quote, birds of a feather flock together online. And their goal was to create what they referred to as a early warning political radar system to be able to track how political groups around the world were rising and falling and how they were congregating together on the internet. Because in Web 1.0, you had web forums and you had these static web pages. And so you could track what groups in country X were accessing or maintaining these websites. And you could use that to draw a network map of an entire political movement that you either wanted to run CIA support to, or you wanted the CIA to crush through counterinsurgency. And part of this involved tracking search results through the early search engines that were created to be able to navigate this new internet. And this is where Google comes into the picture. In 1995, Larry Page and Sergey Brin are PhD students at Stanford, and their PhD is being sponsored essentially by DARPA. They had a DARPA grant to do this search engine aggregation work. And that DARPA grant meant that they were reporting to their grant administrator, which was ultimately the CIA and the NSA. They would then take this work that they got the CIA NSA grant to do to form a company called Google in 1998. So right from the outset, Google was a military and CIA and statecraft, let's say dual-use technology, shall we say. Even all of Google's first mover advantages were based on this. Google quickly came out with very innovative product sets like Google Maps, a sort of first of its kind ability to be able to just plug in an address and know how to get there or go anywhere on Earth and zoom in on it. Well, Google didn't just, brainiacs sitting in a garage, come up with the code for that. They got Google Maps by purchasing the CIA's keyhole satellite software. So it was the CIA's spy satellite software that is the only reason Google got Google Maps. Google's global operations work is based on this as well.
Debt causes stress. I've been in debt in my life and it's very stressful. I recognize that. PDS Debt has customized options for anyone struggling with credit cards, personal loans, collections, or medical bills. PDS Debt provides options that consolidate your debts into one low monthly payment. I wonder if my life would have been easier had I had access to PDS Debt. PDS Debt is a top-rated company on Google with an A+ rating on the BBB. I imagine that it might be a good solution to consolidate debts rather than having diffuse, confusing debts. PDS Debts cares about helping you get out of debt. Check out reviews, see how many mention PDS Debt employees by name. It's incredible. Get free debt analysis right now at pdsdebt.com/brand. It only takes 30 seconds. That's pdsdebt.com/brand. pdsdebt.com/brand.
So one of the reasons that censorship set in across Google search results and across YouTube is because of a fundamental restructuring of how Google operated beginning after the 2016 US presidential election. Started a little bit before that with the story of a guy named Jared Cohen. So let's just take a step back and look at the history of social media. You had Facebook in 2004, YouTube in 2005, Twitter in 2006, smartphone in 2007. In 2007, a young kid named Jared Cohen arrives at the inner sanctum of the State Department. It's a place called the Policy Planning Staff. The iceberg of American diplomacy has overt policies and strategies from the State Department and covert from the CIA. And so they together form a united front of U.S. diplomacy. which means the dirty tricks from the covert side have to be constantly synchronized with the overt actions of the State Department. So that if you're trying to regime change, the country's government, the State Department has to know that and know exactly what's going on when they send a delegation to that foreign country's government for their demands or what they want. That synchronization process happens at the policy planning staff. That's that inner cell within the State Department that coordinates the CIA and the State Department. And this is a place that's normally occupied by the sort of wise old men, 50, 60, 70-year-old, fuddy-duddies. Jared Cohen got there at about the age 25, 26. Young kid, but he was brought on by the Bush administration because he had created something called movements.org, and he was embedded basically from his late teen years into the highly volatile youth movements that were being essentially sponsored by the CIA in Middle East, North Africa, in these conflict zones. And because it's so important to instrumentalize student groups and youth groups for color revolutions in U.S. statecraft, he was brought in as essentially a young guy who's hip to what the kids are doing these days, so that could be folded into American statecraft for how best to exploit those young people. And what Jared Cohen did is he gets in around 2006, 2007, and he looks around at these older guys and he says, what are we doing formulating CIA activities out of U.S. embassies or U.S. consulates or CIA station houses? All the groups we want to mobilize are on Facebook. They're on Twitter. They're on YouTube. We need a doctrine of digital statecraft 2.0, to be able to run intelligence operations using social media. And this became the absolute talk of the town of Washington, and he became an overnight celebrity with this concept. He was considered so valuable to not just the Bush administration and Condoleezza Rice, the Secretary of State there, as a Republican appointee, but his work was considered so vital, the CIA's use of social media, that he was kept over by the Democrats when Barack Obama won the 2008 election and Hillary Clinton became Secretary of State. This is extremely unusual in Washington, let me tell you, when a political appointee is kept over from the next administration. And so he then was effectively credited with starting the Arab Spring, which was a State Department and CIA-sponsored series of Facebook and Twitter revolutions stretching from Tunisia to Egypt, which were said to be the sort of high point of digital democracy, when hashtags and Facebook groups were used to coordinate tens of millions of people to take to the streets to overthrow governments that were deemed to be hostile to U.S. interests. At that point, Jared Cohen could have done anything. He was voted by Time magazine as one of the top 50 most powerful people in Washington at the age of 30. But he left in the heat of all of that. People were saying, this kid's going to be president one day. He could have done anything, but he goes over and basically stuns the Beltway crowd by moving in 2010 to a tiny little one-person nonprofit within a mid-sized tech company called Google. At the time in 2010, Google was only ranked number 120 by market cap in terms of U.S. companies. They were not even a top 100 sized company in 2010. And he was poached by Google, as the story goes, in order to sit in a room all day, stare at a white wall, and think by himself about all the creative ways that Google could use its proprietary data and resources to solve complex geopolitical problems. Julian Assange would later term this transition the moment that Google became the shadow State Department. And this came out in Stratfor documents and WikiLeaks when, basically CIA contractors were openly speculating that Jared Cohen's move from policy planning staff at State to Google was a way to synchronize what the CIA was doing with Google resources. Now, this becomes very important to the internet censorship story because this one-person think tank, Google Ideas, would later be rebranded Google Jigsaw. And Google Jigsaw was initially doing sort of a lot of free speech tech work so that dissident groups being backed by the CIA and State Department would be able to freely proliferate their media influence in regions where there was state control over media, like Iran or like Egypt. But in 2016, Google Jigsaw took on a new power for censorship of political movements that were giving rise to leaders like Donald Trump in the US, also on the left-wing populist side, like Jeremy Corbyn in the UK, who are NATO skeptical, all the different populist parties in Europe, in India, in Pakistan, in Japan. And so Google Jigsaw became this kind of CIA intermediated censorship octopus, and it created what was essentially the world's first retail, what I call weapons of mass deletion, AI censorship superpowers to be able to scan and ban tens of millions of posts, when it created, in the immediate aftermath of the 2016 election, something called Perspective, which rates every post essentially on the internet by a toxicity score that can be used to automatically throttle it from public view.
Jesus Christ, Jared. I mean, Mike, there's a lot there. I feel like you're going to get killed. My first response is you're going to be killed and you're going to get us all killed, because that's too cogent and too clear and too plain.
Hey, this is exciting. We've got a great partner today. It's Rumble. But beyond Rumble, it's Rumble's latest venture. Let me ask you first, are you a Sleepy Joe type character with zero cognitive performance, struggling to muster focus and brain power for basic things like running the United States of America? You've got to stop drinking woke liberal coffee that hates you and your way of life and start your day by drinking Rumble's very own 1775 coffee. This is going to be the best tasting coffee you've ever had. Seriously good, ethically sourced from a family farm in the high altitude mountains of Bolivia. Not in the Bolivian lowlands, run not by a family but by a single man still living with a pet. No! Instead of waking up and drinking your big corporation owned woke ideology coffee that's probably making you sick from the pesticides it's sprayed with, try Rumble's 1775 revolutionary coffee. Support freedom of speech. Build a parallel economy that actually values you and loves you. My favourite? It's dark, of course. I've always found the lure of the dark irresistible. I'm sorry, how can I stay mad at you? You're just going to have to wait over there for a little while. Level up your morning routine with a 1775 coffee. Sleep all night knowing your hard-earned dollary dues are going towards supporting freedom-loving creators like me on Rumble. Visit 1775coffee.com now, pick up your first bag, use the code BRAND to save 10% on your first order. Oh, come on. Why choose,
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.